Yeah, today we will understand. Today topic is device authentication using radius protocol. As you know that radius protocol is basically communication mechanism for AAA authentication, authorization and accounting. Is basically communication between the NAS box. NAS means network address server and the radius server. NAS box means your routers or switches or firewall, that is called NAS box. It's basically communicate between the NAS box and radius server. Now radius server is typically connectionless services, and so what really happened behind the scene when you configure as a radius? Try to understand. The NAS box, like network address server, is communicate with the radius server. It does the UDP. As for look at old RFC, it will using UDP port number 1645 and 1646. However, this was basically a conflict between your data matrix services. That's why new RFC was created for radius server, and the newer RFC was basically RFC number 2865. As for new RFC, the newer UDP port could be 1812 and 1813. If you look at Cisco ICE, it gives you option using radius protocol, or you could use TACAS, but this ICE will support radius and TACAS both. If you're using radius, it support both the port number, the older port number also, and the newer port number also. If suppose 1645 for authentication and 1646 for accounting, which is old RFC port number, and also support new one as for the newer RFC, which is 1812 and 1813. Now, what typically happen behind the scene when you configure the radius server? Let's say a user wants access a certain device. User once access a certain device, and you want to manage the access, and you want to authorize the access depending on it is right user or user who support accessing the device. Let's say user Sagir, one user is there and that user name is Sagir and need to access certain router, and now without authentication, what's going to happen? Anybody can do telnet or maybe SSH or console access and get access device. You really don't want that. You want to authenticate the user, and you want to authorize the user, and you want to lock that. So that's going to happen through production, which is Cisco I, like product which is Cisco ICE, and NAS server, that the communication between the NAS box and ICE products is done using radius protocol. So we have options, TACAS also, but can use radius also. What's going to happen? Let's say Sagir, and Sagir using window machine, and he does SSH to the router. The router who's acting as a NAS device, as a client, he is going to prompt for him, give me the username and password. And this username and password is basically like a PAP or chat, depending upon how you configure that. Suppose Sagir want to access some devices and that router behave like a NAS box. In that point of time, this NAS box prompt you, give me the username and password, and that username and password will be using map and chat. So that NAS device is going to prompt for username and password. Once the user provide credential, he puts username and password, the NAS devices send that access request message to ICE, which is going to be radius server. So he sends request to ICE. ICE is going to reply back saying, okay, this is user want to authenticate it, or maybe he rejected. Maybe I sends back access reject message, or maybe I sends back to access accept. ICE check his local database, or he check maybe any active directory. You can join any active directory join point. ICE check his local database, or he check active directory join point. The C username is exist or password is correct. Once is authenticated, ICE could authorize him, basically sending back to him access message or access accept, saying okay, he is allowed to access this device. Once one thing you should know is that Radius server is pretty straightforward to configure, but you need to configure both the side in your NAS box side also and your server side also. So on the NAS box, basically configure thing like I do want to authentication for this port or this device for telnet or maybe SSH. For the console logging, you have enabled those settings. So anybody doing a telnet or anybody doing a SSH, the NAS box has been configured. Authentication, do not give him access directly, because you configure that NAS box is going to challenge. The user is saying, hey, provide me these credential. Once he provide those credential, now you have to configure NAS box, who is my Radius server. Once he gets username and password, the NAS box going to check, okay, I have been to configure ICE and whose IP address, let's say 192.168.1.111. So my switch or my router is going to send that request UDP request. It will send that request UDP request, that is UDP request, which is going to send, which is going to be maybe 1812 for authentication and 1812 for accounting, or could be he use maybe older port like 1645, or according to older RFC could be used, port number could be 1646. Sends access request to that Radius server. That Radius server is going to back local database. The first thing Radius server check is you are my client. Once Radius server is checked, CSR is my client, then Radius server is reply back to you. Otherwise, it will drop your packet silently. He cannot send any log also, and he cannot generate any message also. Once your NAS box, suppose NAS device like CSR1 is my client, then Radius server must respond back to CSR1. The Radius server does not know you are my client, and when the NAS sends request to Radius server for authentication, ICE is going to reject that, and that request will be ignored. That request, because you are not my client. So you have to configure the NAS box, say who is my Radius server, and we have to configure ICE and your Radius server, who is my client. Once ICE know you are my client and you send me access request, ICE is going to check his local database. Inside of local database, he can check this user is belongs to me or not. For that, username and password. The database could be local database, or could be active directory join point, or could be guest account. As long as database exists and username password is correct, ICE check authorization policy and authorize the user by sending back to the NAS box access accept. one thing also one thing also send, maybe he will send VLAN information and send that access list like your DACL, and that many more things can be sent back to your NAS devices. But minimum it's send access accept or access reject. Once I sends back to NAS box, hey, this guy authorized. That means Sagir is authorized. user is using username and password is correct, he is authorized to log in the NAS box, is give you that access, itself. That's going to happen behind the scene. In behind the scene, this kind of process is going on. Now, officially, all communication, all radius server communication between the NAS box and the radius server is done using the radius protocol, is using attribute, is done using attribute. Let's say I log in, maybe I try to log in or I do a telnet to the router. Router will prompt me username and password. Once I provide those credentials, the NAS box or the router is going to send that username password to ICE. But he does not send username as a Sagir, username as equal to Sagir. He basically sends attribute, all communication between the NAS box and radius server is done using attribute. That means what? All the communication, suppose this is Sagir and he is taking to telnet access to CSR5, and this CSR5 router will prompt me, give me the username and password. Once he will provided the username is Sagir and password is Cisco. In that point of time, this CSR5 will take that username not as equal to username as a Sagir. It will take that username Sagir is belongs to attribute number 1 and send to ICE. Attribute number 1 is equal to username and attribute number 2 is equal to password. All the communication between NAS box and all the communication between my ICE box and NAS device based on attribute. So, a specific attribute for a specific thing, for example, a username attribute number could be 1, basically NAS box. Attribute number 1 equals to Sagir. He sent attribute number 1. Then ICE identify, oh, attribute number 1 is equal to username and username is equal to Sagir. That's it. And one more thing, let's say I know that username is Sagir. This is what happened behind the scene. One thing you should know, radius server or radius protocol is basically connectionless services. So it's using maybe older port like UDP 1645 or 1646, 1645 or 1646. And services, either you could use UDP port number 1645 or UDP port number 1646, or maybe he used newer port like newer RFC according, newer port could be 1812 and 1813. So I am going to do how it actually work and how build this communication between the NAS box and the radius server. Who is my NAS box? NAS box is my CSR1 and radius server is my ICE. For radius server ICE, here I am using ICE 2.4 and for NAS box I am using my router. I will test that doing maybe telnet or maybe SSH. To do that, device using a username is Sagit. Let's try and do that. Any doubt? Surya, this kind of process will working in behind the scene when using as a device authentication using radius protocol or maybe TACAS.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Yeah, I have a router here like a CSR1, maybe R1, and I have a so many router R1, CSR2, CSR3, and CSR1, CSR5. I have a CSR7, 6. So many router is here. I have a router and can communicate with ICE. I can check it. My router will reachable in my eyes or not. I go to my CSR1. I tested my CSR1. In CSR1, check that route. So IP route I have 192 network. Yeah, I have 192.168.1.0 island via OSPF. Once I try to ping 192.168.1.111, but my CSR router cannot reach to my ICE. Then go to the ICE. This is my ICE. Username could be admin and password is capcisc01234. Once I log in my ICE and I can check I have a route or not. Show IP route. I don't have any 155 or 150 network, then I can configure a route in my ICE. IP route 150 150.0.0.0 and 255.0.0.0, and my gateway could be 192.168.1.157. This is my gateway, and I need one more route, IP route 155.1.0.0, 16.255.255.00, and my gateway could be same 192.168.1.157, and I can write my configuration to write. Cisco I support both. It will support Takas also, and it will support Radius also. It's really up to you setup router you want to use Takas protocol or you want to use Radius protocol. In this case, we'll focus on Radius. I will focus where? In Radius. What will we do on my switch or router side? On the switch side, first we have enabled my AAA authentication. Or like you have to tell the NAS box, somebody trying to connect to me, then I must ask him for authentication. By default, not going to ask for that. Let's say you can telnet any device. In this point of time, it cannot ask username and password. This is my CSR1 config T line VTY 0 to 4 and transport input all. Exit and go to R1, or maybe you can check first reachability. Ping 150.1.1.1. This is my CSR1 loopback IP. I have a reachability and ping 155.1.10.1. This is my CSR1 so interface IP. Done. Then I want to telnet. Go to my topology here and I take telnet access like R1 and I want to telnet access. Enable telnet 150.1.1.1. It will give me that directly access, but it will say password is not required, password is not set. Then go to CSR1 and config T and put that line VTY 0 to 4 and login. Passwords required but not set. It will give me that access. He cannot prompt me username and password. He cannot prompt me username and password. Once you configure telnet or password, there is no security is there. I want to see who is logging into my box. I want to see that, and that's why my AAA authentication is going to become in, and I will configure my NAS. I will configure my eyesight. Remember, radius or TACAS is just a communication mechanism between your NAS and radius server. So it's just a communication mechanism. So either use radius or radius protocol or use TACAS plus, either ones you can use. But here I move to my CSR1, exit it here, and first I enable what? AAA new model. And after that, AAA
Sorry,
authentication.
sir. Sorry.
Yes,
Sorry. Is it NAD or NAS?
NAS box. Network address, you can call NAS box also and NAD also. Network access
Oh,
device or network access server. Whatever you call. NAD, NAS, both are same. You call
okay.
somewhere you can call in NAD also and NAS also. Both are meaning same.
Okay.
Yeah. NAD also you can call NAD device, network address device. I enable first AAA new model, and after that AAA authentication and login. I'm login as a console, then I use con, just a name. This is just a significant name. Use any name. Group I'm using which protocol? Either you could use radius protocol, either you could use the CAS protocol. I'm using radius. Suppose my radius protocol is not available. Any reason my radius server is down. Then what's happened in that point of time? What's going to happen? In that point of time, you log in your local database. That means you put here local. What I'm authenticating once login or authenticating maybe .1x or authenticating, you can enable it. I am authenticating login. So anybody is trying to log in the router through a console, login through maybe VTY or SSH through the radius server, then define template. Now we have two options. I could use default template or I could create custom template. It all depends upon you. Let's say I use like a console name could be. After that, scope of local, try to understand scope of local keyword. Here I am using local keyword now. Scope of local keyword, if my radius server is down, any reason my radius server is down, in that case, nobody log in my router at that point of time. I should have a backup method in my router local database. Or here you can see radius server, not yeah, AAA authentication, login, put that question mark. Here either I could use as a default or default means then define a template. Now I have a two option. I could use default template. Default template means you could use default, or either I can use a name, but here I am using as a name could be con. Let's say I want that my console login should not be authenticated and my remote login like VTY or SSH should be authenticated. In that case, I could create a custom template and not use the default. Using the default means basically apply all your line, your console or auxiliary or VTY or SSH, it's apply all of them. Recommended using custom. Let's create one custom one. This is the reason I create a custom template in my and scope of local, you know about radius server is not available in that point of time. You use router local database. Then that is my console. And after that, AAA authentication login VTY. VTY means telnet and group. Here you can see either you could use default or either you could use custom template. I can create my custom template. AAA authentication login VTY and put that question mark. Here you have enable group. Here I am using group. Use server group. Then I using here group. After that, I will define radius or TACAS. In group, I am using radius protocol, and radius server is not available. In that case, you could use local database. And done. Then I create username and password. Username admin, privilege 15. Password could be Cisco. Username admin, privilege 15, password could be Cisco. Define, and rest of all the AAA is done. Then define, next thing, define radius server location. Who is my radius server and who should I communicate when I am going to ask send that username and password. Please provide those credentials, and where send those credentials for authentication. That's my radius server. So I should define that location of my radius server. Radius server, you could use any name. Here I am using name could be RAD. You use any name. And after that, you can define address. Address I am using, either you could use, you can see IPv4 or IPv6. I am using IPv4 and put that your radius server IP. That means your ICE IP. My ICE IP is 192.168.1.168.1.111. This is my ICE IP. And after that, it will asking authentication port, you can see, or accounting port. I am using authentication port. You can put that 02655535. My authentication port according to RFC 1812, and accounting port according to my RFC, my accounting port could be 1813 according to newer RFC. Older RFC is 1645, 1646, 1812, 1813. And after that, you can define your key. Key could be Cisco. I'm using as a Cisco. That's it. I enable my AAA new model. I define my radius server location and I put that. And after that, I go to my line VTY 0 to 4, 0 to 4, and login authentication. What is my template name? My template name could be VTY. I call that template name could be here. Enter and exit it here. In this point of time, R1 trying to access telnet. In this point of time, it will prompt me username and password. You can see it will prompt me username and password. Go to the ICE HTTPS 192.168.1.111. This is new ICE, blank ICE. Nothing is there. Username is admin. Password is capc ISC01234. In this ICE, nothing is there. This is blank ICE. You can see this is blank ICE. And go to the identities. I don't have any username. Default configuration is there. Go to the setting. Inside of setting, go to the protocol setting, radius setting. I can disable this one, but go to the password policy. Maybe this one also I can uncheck it. User authentication setting, you can see. When you go to the exam prospective, guys, suppose you're going to exam in Cisco, in production prospective, don't use that. But in exam prospective, when you log in your ICE, move to directly radius and go to the protocol and radius. You can disable these two check boxes. By default, these two check boxes is enabled. This one and this one. You can disable it. After that, once you disable this one, then you move to where? Go to the identity management. Inside of identity management, go to the setting. Inside of setting, go to the user authentication setting. Suppose I'm not disabling and I can create a user. Maybe user could be Sagir or password could be Cisco. I create one user. User could be Sagir and password could be Sagir. And he's not belonging in a group. I'm not creating any group and submit it. In this point of time, it will show you error. You can see creation failed to user Sagir because in password policy could be not match. Done. I'm not creating username in this point of time. I create CSR1 as a client of ICE. Then first I check who is communicate to my ICE, which interface is communicate to my ICE. IP, radius, source interface, which interface is communicate to my ICE. Either you could use physical interface or either you could use loopback interface. Here I am using loopback 1. And do show IP interface brief. What is my IP? 1.1, 150.1.1.1. 150.1.1.1. Send that radius request to my ICE. Then go to the administration. First, you go to the network resources, go to the NDG, network devices group. Inside of network devices group, you can create some group. Click on add all CSR routers. All CSR routers. And this is belongs to where? All device types. Save it. One more group you can create it. Add all switches. And this is belongs to all device types and save. And one more group you can create. All firewall. And this is belongs to all device type and save. Done. I created 3 group. All CSR router, all firewall, all switches, but I don't have any locations. Then I create on add, maybe location could be Mumbai. Location could be Mumbai, and this is belongs to all location. Save it and add maybe Bangalore, and you can select it here. All location Bangalore, and you create one more group, and this is belongs to Delhi. And this is belongs to all location and so I have a 3 NDG group like all CSR router, all firewall, all switches. I create 3 router groups and these are my locations Bangalore, Delhi, Mumbai. But IPsec device I don't. Done. Then I go to administration, network resources and network devices. Inside of network devices I don't have any device. Then I add CSR1 as a client of ICE. In this point of time, you can see I am taking that telnet access 150.1.1.1. I can put username could be admin and password could be Cisco. It's login because it is using local database. In this point of time, your ICE is not responsive. You can see. I don't see any log. Go to the live log. TTY session. In this point of time, it sent that request to my ICE. Yeah, in this point of time, you can see it's logging my local database. Why? Because my radius server is not available. See the detailed report. You can see the detailed report. Inside of detailed report, you can see radius request dropped. Why? Failure reason, you can see the reason, could not locate network device or a AAA client. That means CSR1 not a client of ICE. This is the reason ICE is not response back to routers. Then go to Administration, network devices, I can add, click on add, I add my CSR1. CSR1 and CSR1 IP could be 150.1. And location, maybe it belongs to Mumbai. All router is belongs to Mumbai, all switches belongs to Delhi, and maybe firewall is belongs to Bangalore. And device type, maybe all CSR router. I am using which protocol? Radius. Then go to the radius and I define one key now, address IPv4, and I put that my ICE IP authentication port, accounting port, and after that I using one key. Key could be Cisco, and same key you use here also, Cisco. Show that Cisco and save it, submit it. In this point of time, CSR1 is my client. In this point of time, CSR1 is my client. Once I take that telnet access, you can see, go to the R1. I'm logging here, and once I exit, telnet 150.1.1.1, username is admin and password is Cisco. In this point of time, I'm not able to log in because my ICE must respond back to my NAS device. He is doing telnet to CSR1. CSR1 prompt me username and password. Let's say I will provide username as a admin and password is Cisco. And that request, CSR1 send that request to Radius as a communication method to ICE. ICE check, first check CSR1 is my client. Who is sending me request? Yes, he is my client. So ICE has response. ICE check local database. If the username exists, password is correct, authentication pass. Once authentication process is moved on, then move to authorization policy. In authorization is how I send back access accept is the authorization I need to assign, give him authorization profile, which contain access accept or access reject. In this point of time, this is the process is going on. You can see the log message policy, go to the operations, radius live log, you can see username and password is invalid. And check the detail report, you can see subject not found in the applicable identity stores. Authentication failed because this username and password is not exist. This is the reason it will send that access reject. You can see access request and create the new session, evaluating the policy, and it will who will carry. You can see, and using that pipe protocol method could be pipe protocol, pipe and chat. Network device could be CSR1 and NAS IPv4 could be one. You can see you call NAS or you call NAT. Both are network address server. That IP could be 150.1.1.1. And NAS port ID could be TTY, that is telnet, and NAT port type could be virtual. And once you move access request, it will check where internal user, he cannot found inside of internal user. After that, it will go and check all AD join points. In this point of time, admin and Cisco, it is not a part of internal user and it is not a part of all AD join point, and this is not a part of guest access. Then it will match to default and it will send back to access reject because this username and password is not belongs to local database or all AD join point or guest user. Then it will match to default and it will send to access reject because authentication failed. Clear? Then after that, I create one username. Then I go to the setting. First I go to the setting, user authentication setting. I can uncheck these boxes. Lowercase, uppercase, numeric, this thing, save it. Then I go to the identities and first I create one group, I create one group, not endpoint identity group. I create user identity group. Maybe employee is there. I create one group that is name could be Cisco employee. Cisco employee. Then I go to the identities and I create here one user. User could be Sagir. And password I am using here Cisco. Confirm password I am using Cisco. And this user is belongs to which group? Cisco employee. I can select here Cisco employee. First name I using Khan and last name I am using Sagir, and email ID you can put khansagir446 at gmail.com. khansagir446 at gmail.com. And this is belongs to internal user or AD join internal user. I create one internal user and submit it. You can see. I create one username Sagir and first name, last name, email address is this one, and this one is belongs to Cisco employee. In this point of time, once I take that access, maybe it's login. Sagir and password could be Cisco. I'm able to log in. Why? I'm not creating any profile or any policies. Then try to understand, see the log report, go to the operations radius live log. You can see Sagir, because Sagir is my client, radius access accept. Once your authentication is succeeded, then it will move to where? Authorization policy. Inside of authorization policy, it will match to top to down. And once it will not match to first rule, second rule, third rule, then it will match to before last rule. One rule is there, and that rule is saying permit IP any. Anyone is coming to here, and I will allow it. You can see. It will match to authorization profile that is say permit access. This is the reason access accept. Sagir, internal user. In this point of time, it belongs to authenticate and identity store could be internal user. User type user, it belongs to internal user. IP, this is my NICE IP address 150.1.1.1 and I am using TTY, and port number 1812, and all guest user not basic authenticated access default, and network device profile it will put that Cisco, and username radius username is equal to 7. All the communication between your radius and NAS box is using attribute. I will show you. Enable debug radius authentication. Done. You can see exit it here, and I send that telnet request. You can see I provide wrong username, maybe admin, and password could be Cisco. You can see radius username attribute number 1, that is admin. Attribute number 2, that is your password. Attribute number 4, that is your port. These are attributes. You need some specific attribute disable in your router, you can enable it. How? 150 radius server attribute maybe 6 on for login auth, and radius server attribute maybe 8. In 8 is showing include request, include in access request, and attribute number 5, 25. These are attribute by default disabled. Radius server attribute 25. This is include not access request include. exit it here, and it will send more information. Admin Cisco. You can see. Attribute number 6, service type attribute, and 8, 25, it's not sending. These are some attributes is disabled, and 5 to 6, all the communication between NAS box and your radius server using attribute. Once I put username is correct, like Sagir, telnet, username could be Sagir, and password is Cisco. In this point of time, you can see detail, all detail. Class attribute 25 number could be class, and 24 is enable, and username is Sagir, and 6 is equal to NAS IP addresses, and all the communication between your NAS box and your ICE using attribute. In this point of time, I am able to log in. Why? Because it will match to this policy. Go to the policy sets, inside of default policy. Inside of default policy, go to the authentication policy. It will match to default role. In authentication, default rule is say permit IP any. Don't change it here anything. Move to authorization policy. Inside of authorization policy, in this point of time, it will match to basic authentication access, and he is saying permit access. This is the reason he will allow it, and he will access telnet. Suppose I disable this one, disable, and I try to log in, save it, and once I take into telnet access, I am not able to log in. Exit. Username is Sagir, and password could be Cisco. In this point of time, I am not able to log in because it will match to last rule. It will match which rule? In this rule, it will match to top to down. In authorization policy, it will match to this rule, this rule, this rule. After that, it will match to this rule. In default rule is saying deny access. See the log. Go to the live log. You can see Sagir. Authentication failed. You can see it will match to where selected authorization profile. It will say deny access. Reject per authorization profile. Then I create my own profile. How? Go to my ICE, go to the policy sets, go to the default policy, don't change in authentication, go to the authorization, I create one rule, click on setting icon, insert new row above, name. What name I'm using here? I use name here, Cisco employee device login. Cisco employee device login. After that, click on plus icon. Once I click on plus icon, you can select here identity group name, click to attribute and go to identity group. Inside of identity group, you can select identity group name. Equals to, you can select here, it belongs to user identity group. Don't select endpoint identity group. Select user identity group. User identity group, and Sagir is belongs to which group member? Cisco employee. Then I can select it here. And click one more condition, new, and click on here and go to port, go to the port, and inside of port attribute, I am using radius NAS port type, radius NAS port type, you can select here radius NAS port type 61 and equals to choose from list. Here you can select virtual. I am using virtual. You can select it here virtual. Condition here, if he is belongs to use Cisco employee and he is doing remote login, which means VTY sessions, then give him permit access and use this one. Done. This is your policy. In this condition means condition here, if he is belongs to Cisco employee and he is doing remote login, which means telnet or VTY sessions, then give him permit access. Here you can select permit access. Permit access. Save. Then I move to my R1. Telnet. It will prompt me asking username and password. Once I put username could be Sagir and password could be Cisco. I am able to log in my CSR1. Now, in this point of time, it will match to which policy? It will match to this authorization policy. This authorization policy. Once condition, my condition is saying anyone is trying to telnet access like VTY session and he is using username is Sagir and password is Cisco. Yeah, Sagir is my client. Once, suppose, sorry. First summary, in first you make CSR1 as a client of ICE. Once it's done, then after that you go to the create one group. Maybe you can create a group or maybe you use local predefined group, but here I am using, I create one group, that is group name could be Cisco employee. And once you created group, I create one user, Sagir, and I make Sagir as a Cisco employee group. And it will match to first default rule. Default rule is saying deny access. Then I create a own group, own custom policy. In my own custom policy is saying condition here, if he belongs to Cisco employee and he is doing to remote login like VTY session, give him permit access. In this point of time, it will match to this rule and it will allow it. Everything basically need NAS box to be configured AAA new model, authentication template apply, template console or VTY define, the radius server, radius server or your new NAS box using local username and password as a backup. On the ICE side, make CSR as a client. There create a username, put username as a group and then authorization policy and create a condition which say if he belongs to group and he is trying to device login like remotely, then maybe give him permit access or give him authorization policy or authorization profile that is called permit access, which contain access accept. This is all that need in your device authentication using radius protocol. Any doubt, anyone? Surya, Tariq, any doubt?
No, Sagir.
In this point of time, go to see the log, operations radius live log. You can see Sagir added this one, or you can create your own custom profile also. Received radius access request and radius create a new sessions and it will find out in internal user. Inside of internal user is Sagir, authentication could be pass. After that, evaluating authorization policy and NAS port type and logical profile that is called permit access. You can see here authorization profile. It can push Cisco employee device login. We'll match to this one. Authorization result is saying permit access. Inside of permit access, you can see inside of permit access this kind of, in permit access you can see here name, permit access description. It will only for here access accept. Here only for access accept. Default profile with access type as access accept. That's it. Permit access is the call as access accept. And CSR1, and CSR1 is belongs to device type all CSR router, and location it will belongs to Mumbai, and NAS IP address 150.1.1, and NAS port type could be virtual, and authorization profile is called as permit access. Using that destination port could be 1812, protocol it will use radius protocol. In your NAS box and ICE, we will communicate with radius protocol using attribute. And Cisco employee device login, Mumbai Sagir, and it will push that reauth session, and class could be this one, permit access. And one more thing, guys, give me a 2 minutes. I will back because I need water. Yeah, in this point of time, it will push that permit access. Either you can create your customized authorization profile also. How? How you can create it? You can create your customized profile also. Then go to the policy. Inside of policy sets, go to the result. Inside of result, I don't use the decal. Go to the authorization policy profile. Inside of authorization profile, you can create your customized profile. Maybe click on add. I can create my profile. Name could be OZ. Name I'm using OZ, and maybe any name device admin. OZ device admin. And after that, go to attribute Go to the advanced setting. Inside of advanced attribute setting, and you can click on select an item, and you can select here Cisco. Inside of Cisco, you can select Cisco AV pair. Cisco AV pair 1 in that point of time is equal to, you can push that priv hyphen level 15. Priv hyphen LBL, maybe space is there or not, hyphen LBL 15 is equal to, hyphen is not there, priv hyphen LBL is equal to 15. And save it, submit it, and go to your policy. But this one is not working in radius, but Takas is working. You need to create customized command in your CSR router also. Go to the policy sets here and go to profile or C device admin. Select it, and once I try to log in, R1, exit, severe, password will be system. It is working. Show privilege level could be 15. Here it should not, but it should work when you go to the CSR1. You can see here it will also push that. You can see Cisco AV pair 15, priv level 15. In this point of time, go to operations radius live log, see the detailed report. It will push that OSG device. In this point of time, it will push that this profile. Or maybe I need to create some customization in my CSR router. Go to CSR1 and config key, and I use one command show run pipe section AAA. I have a login con and VTY. Then I use to AAA authorization, exec. Name I'm using Aussie. You could use default template. Before I'm using VTY, no? Name could be VTY, or maybe name I'm using Aussie. Name could be Aussie. Group could be radius, and protocol, yeah, group could be radius. Enter. Then do show run pipe section. Username, maybe username is there. I have a username. Then I move to my line VTY 0 to 5, and I call that authorization exec. You can put that as C. Auth C. Enter. Done. If apply any exec, you must enable AAA authorization. Otherwise, these are command useless. You need to apply one command. Otherwise, these are command is useless. Which command you can apply? You can apply AAA authorization console. console. This command you can apply. Otherwise, all the command is in this command. ASCII, group radius, these are command is useless. Enter, exit. And once I try to log in, maybe it should work. Telnet, Sagir, password could be just. But prev-label 15, it will match to this role, but exact label is not applied. Then I can create some rule, or maybe you create your some command you can enable, but in this point of time where it's not working, but it will match to this profile as will push that this result. Or maybe this one is done, and once which basically say my eyes, Cisco users cannot do console access. The only reason is that we have a permitted console access was Cisco, and in this point of time I create some privilege label also in my CSR router. Then config T, I using privilege, basically define custom privilege in my CSR router like AAA authorization and command set 15, and I'm using VTY, VTY, or could be local. Done. And after that privilege exit. Okay, password could be Cisco able to have this profile error in authentication privilege level exit. Or I can put that priv AAA authorization commands, maybe command set could be 2, and I can put not 2 is not working. Privilege exact label could be 2. In that point of time you could use config T. Done. And priv level 2 you can use interface command. Priv level 2 interface priv level 2, put that question mark line number 2, and you use interface. I put that line number 2 priv exact label, and privilege label may be 2. You can put initial keyword of the command to modify. I can use shut not taking, or maybe 2, 1, that question mark, 1 is not taken. You could use interface. Interface is not taken, or maybe no shut. Done. No shut is done, and exit it. Exit here. NetMet service passport Cisco. It is not go, but it will match to my priv level 15. Radius and TACAS pretty much is different, but TACAS it's provide the privilege level also, and which command you can put, you can type in your ICE, and ICE will push that policies in your Cisco devices in that point of time. It's work, but here you can customize. Once you customize, it's working. And here go to the radius live log, detailed report, authentication is succeed. And one more thing I can try, go to the policy administration network devices and go to the CSR1, edit it, and not here, go to the administration identities, edit severe username, and it will ask you enable password. Maybe it's working. Cisco. R1, exit it here. Severe Cisco enable. No, it's not working. So privilege level could be 1. But in this point of time, it will match to which policy? It will match to this policy, this profile, sorry. It will match to this profile. Access, or it will contain save it, exit, username, Sagir, password could be Cisco, privilege 1. I can remove space. We need to split it. Cisco AV pair and R1, exit it here. Username Savir and password could be Cisco. Show image, not push that. But it will match to this profile. Save it. Yeah, show image. Show privilege. It will push that privilege level 50. You can see here no need to space. Only for between is equal to, after that you can put that space. And before no need any kind of space it here. Pref hyphen level LVL is equal to 15. It should push that privilege level 15 and on 50 and configure do show IP interface. Do show IP Done. Undo show IP OSPF. I have full access. Done. Here no need to space. Brief hyphen label is equal to 50. Cancel it. Exit. Exit. When I go to my CSR1, Cisco AV pair could be prepared. Right. No. On all. Right. Any doubt, anyone? Tariq, Surya. Tariq and Surya, any doubt? In this point of time, my eyes will push that priv level 15 and Intelnet have a full access. But you don't set any command set in your eyes because this feature is not available in your radius protocol. This feature only for provide your takas. Tomorrow I will show you device authentication using takas protocol. And see you guys tomorrow same time. Bye.
Bye, Sagir.
Any doubt?
No, Sagir.
Yeah. See you guys tomorrow same time. Tomorrow we will explain takas protocol using same topic, device authentication, but using radio takas protocol. And maybe we'll start new topic also. We'll finish earlier, then we will start new topic. See you guys tomorrow same time. Bye.